The industry has changed a lot. And by that, I mean, if you look back to how Hollywood used to work, nothing looks the same. First, the streamers came along and disrupted all of the big television networks. Then they moved on and disrupted all of the big film studios. And now that bubble burst because they weren't really as profitable as they thought they were going to be. And now everything is contracting back towards basically cable. It's just going to be hosted on the internet. So this has caused a lot of shifts in the industry. Movie stars do television now. That didn't used to be a thing. Indie movies sometimes make more money than studio movies, but nobody really knows how to decide which one's going to get what. Big blockbuster movies had a rise and a fall. They became tentpoles. They were holding up entire studios with just things like Marvel movies and big blockbusters that would do really well overseas. That's changing. Audiences are getting a little burnt out on one after the other of just formulaic superhero movies. The entire landscape of how movies and television got made has changed dramatically in the last 20 years, but especially so in the last 10. Everything now as a performer or a writer or a director or even an indie producer trying to get your project off the ground, to get that next role, to get your movie made, it has changed. It doesn't work the way it did before. And I think that's okay. I actually think all this disruption leads the way to a lot of potential opportunity. However, you want to make sure you've positioned yourself in such a way to actually take advantage of these opportunities when they arise. That's where being a multi-hyphenate comes in. Being able to create your own content and champion yourself is more important than ever before. Now, how do you do that? First of all, I want you to think about why you want to make your own content. Now, that sounds like a kind of obvious question. Why you make your content is ultimately going to determine the type of content you spend your time making. Now, I have literally made every single mistake possible in this journey of being a multi-hyphenate, so I'm here to tell you all about them so that you don't have to make them too, and you can save yourself a lot of time, money, stress, and heartache. Your why is the number one most important thing to clarify for yourself first. Are you primarily an actor trying to branch out into multi-hyphenate works so that you get more roles? Are you a director that needs a work sample to send to a fellowship program or a lab or a mentorship program or to apply to shadow someone for network TV? That would be a great why. Are you a writer that really needs to get your work made, or you write in a very specific tone and style and you want to direct your own work so that you can get it right? That's a great why. Now, there's a gazillion different combinations of those things all in between, but the most important thing for yourself is to sit down, take a second, and figure out what your why actually is and what your primary goal is to accomplish. You may have more than one why. I will give you an example of my whys. My whys are that I primarily started out as an actor. And I was frustrated at the beginning of my career, as many actors are, because I wasn't getting out as much as I wanted to. Now, here's a couple things. I'm mixed race. I was in my 20s. There was not a lot of clarity around what my casting really was. I would mostly get out because I fit to some sort of tick box of a diversity initiative. So they needed an Asian girl, I'm half Japanese. They needed an Indigenous actress, I'm partially Indigenous. And because I'm mixed race, I can pass. And that was mostly how I was getting called in the room. And it was very frustrating because then I'd go in and I would be next to a not mixed, but fully insert ethnicity here person. And I suddenly looked really white or like a different ethnicity. And I would not get those roles. So I was very frustrated. And I was working really hard. I was taking lots of classes. I felt like I was improving, but somehow I was really having trouble moving the needle forward. And then I heard, create your own content. And I thought, yes, this is going to be my way. One of my old mentors used to say, if nobody will open the door, you have to build your own door and you have to walk through it. And I do believe that. But there are some big mistakes that I made along the way, which I'm going to help you hopefully not make for yourself. Mistake number one in my why being acting, trying to get more roles, I did a first short film and it actually did really well in festivals. The problem was I didn't talk. I just danced. So even though it was artistically well done and I got a lot of accolades as a filmmaker, it didn't really help me get any auditions. Then I spent a ton of money doing the festival circuit. We'll do more videos on that later. So I bankrupted myself on a project where I didn't even speak. Not ideal. That's where I say your why is extremely important. If your why is to get more roles as an actor, as a priority, say priority number 1, you need to make sure that whatever content you create is showcasing your acting to your best ability. Now, if you are not experienced as a writer and you are not experienced as a director and you are not experienced as a producer, I would strongly recommend not trying to do all 4 things for a project where your goal is to showcase yourself as an actor. Now, here's why. Because most likely, if you don't have a lot of experience writing, directing, or producing, you are not going to be able to make the quality project that actually showcases your talent as an actor. This is where you might need to say, okay, I need to create my own work. I think it makes the most sense that I find a writer to collaborate with, or I find a director to collaborate with, and I'm just going to learn how to produce. My next piece of advice is, yes, you can absolutely do all the different hats and you can be all 4, 5, 6, 17,000 things as a multi-hyphenate. However, I would try to focus on getting good at one at a time. This is another mistake I made. This brings us to my second point. It's really hard if you spread yourself thin to recognize and see your progress. So if you decide that you're going to do project to showcase your acting, but before you do that, you have to master writing, you have to master directing, and you have to figure out how to produce something all by yourself. I guarantee you, your project is going to take forever, and you are not going to get the quality results that you want yet. If you are really interested in writing and you're like, you know what, I think I could figure out how to write the script. I just need to find a director and a producer. Great, but pick one hyphenate at a time. Of course, you can study all 4, 5, 6, like I said. If you want to edit, color correct, sound design, compose the music yourself, no one's going to stop you. Just understand that every single hat you add where you are not an expert, you are taking the risk of potentially making your project amateur and unusable for your primary goal, at least at first. Because here's the fact that nobody likes to talk about when they say to make your own content. That it takes trial and error to get good at making content. Nobody's first film is the best thing they've ever made. Or if it is, it's accidental and they spend the rest of their career hoping to get something that good again because they don't actually know how they did it so well. And this is just reality. Your first acting job is not your best work. Hopefully, over time, you continue to improve and grow. That's how all the industries work. And to assume that you're going to pick up a blank page and you're going to write the best script in the world to showcase the best acting in the world your first time out is really unrealistic and a giant waste of your time. If you know you want to be a writer, get writing. Write your first few scripts because they're not going to be your best, but every time you write, you'll get better. It might be your 3rd script that you decide to shoot. It might be your 5th or your 20th. Or you might decide to shoot your first one and learn all your lessons on something that's easy to make mistakes on. But the thing you need to keep in mind is that you will make mistakes. Nobody is going to nail it on their first try out or their second or their third. By the time you see people's films up on the big screen in a feature format, they've probably done a lot of work, whether that's behind the camera, in front of the camera, or in some other production capacity or film school. They've gotten experience somewhere, which is why someone invested in them. Like I said, every once in a while you hear a story about somebody who on their first try wins an Oscar or whatever. That's just an outlying story, and you shouldn't plan on that being you. The next thing I want you to think about with your why is if you have a goal, like you're an actor and you want to showcase yourself, You need to think very, very carefully about what kind of character you want to play and what you actually want to demonstrate in your story. Because here's the thing that gets a little complicated. A really good short film project might not contain all of the elements that you're trying to show for yourself as an actor and your talent. If you really want to show that you could be a down and out, struggling artist and have a role where you're really showing a lot of depth of emotion and intensity, you might find that it's actually really hard to accomplish that in a short film format. You may be better off shooting that with a reel service or just producing a reel. But you have to understand that if you produce something like that for a reel, it's not going to move the needle forward in the other elements of your career. So it's probably not going to be a great writing sample. It's probably not going to be a great directing sample. Maybe it could be, but it's a little bit harder because you don't get a fully contained story. And a lot of times people want to see that. So you want to be clear. Why am I doing this project and what is my primary goal? If your primary goal is to show a directing sample, a work sample for directing fellowships and mentorship programs, then you need to be really paying attention to the script. You want to produce it as high of a level as possible. And you also need to understand that you're going to make mistakes again. So you want to work with people who are more experienced than you so that hopefully those mistakes can be minimized because they will see them coming a mile away when maybe you won't because you're new at this, and that's normal. If you're trying to get a directing sample, I would try to find an experienced writer or an experienced producer or even an experienced actor to come on and have produce with you. We can talk more about that in another video. But you want to find somebody who has done this a bunch of times before and who knows what they're doing. Now, if you're trying to do a writing and directing, I would work with a producer to really make sure that script is the absolute best it can be before you try to jump into getting it made. Those are two completely different processes, and you do not want to be mixing them together. Trying to raise the funds and get your movie made when it still needs rewrites are really just a way to guarantee that you're going to spend a ton of money on something that you don't love. All those things you need to rewrite, all those plot holes, all those potential mistakes are going to be glaring once you put it into production. And once you're on set, and the money is being spent, and the talent is there, and the crew is hired, you won't have time for those rewrites. It will derail you. So really make sure you've taken care of each step on its own. We will talk more about how to take care of those steps and what those steps are in case you're not familiar. But just know that if you're trying to do a directing sample as a writer-director or just as a director, all the other elements need to be as tight as possible so that what people are actually enjoying to watch is your directing work.